Watford, never London, not quite the service station that Southerners erroneously like to comfort themselves with being the boundary between themselves and the grim north. A nothing football club then, a rocket man by the name of Elton John turned up and changed the club, as well as the town, forever. Any Watford fan, or football fan to be honest, owes it to themselves to pick this book up, Watford Forever by John Preston, written in accordance with Elton John. Research for this video comes from this book and genuinely one of the best football books I've ever read. If you've watched a few of these videos and don't know the early history of Watford, you can probably already predict the next minute or so. Provincial Southern club formed in the late 19th century, kicks it about in the Southern League a bit before getting hoovered up into an expanded football league with a grand expansion of 1920. While some aimed for the moon, Portsmouth being the best example, others like Watford were just quite happy to exist. Before we knew it, the Second World War had come, obliterated the continent, gone, and the club was still mid-table in the 3rd Division South. Only the reformatting of English football in 1958, when the 3rd Division went national, forced Watford into a change, not just in division, but from the blue and white to their now familiar gold and black strips. It was around this time that a young fella by the name of Reggie Dwight got taken to the football by his old man Stanley. They saw a decrepit team playing their football in a decrepit stadium, the sclerosis in a run-down town. Watford were quick to regain 3rd tier status, going up after a season of embarrassment in the 4th tier. In their decade in the 3rd division before their eventual promotion in 1969, somewhere along the way, Reggie had become Elton John.
Nicely through the legs of Wall, and in! Hutchinson, oh, a nice little 1-2 there for Houseman. There it is, number 5.
The 2nd division, the semi-final of the Cup, a sample bottle squirt of aftershave as Watford got funnelled out of the duty-free of potential success and back on the runway back down to the 4th division. The most impactful Watford had been as a football club was in focus in the mind of Bill Shankly after eliminating his Liverpool side in the quarter-final of that Cup run. Whilst he'd find the determination to go again at Anfield and set the wheels in motion for another 20 successful years, Watford returned to nothing. Rock bottom was a neon signpost on August 30th, 1975 with a 1-0 loss up at Darlington in the 4th division. The Hornets were booed off by their own fans. 3 games and a month into the season, they had officially sunk to the bottom of the Football League, even beneath the dead men of Southport, Workington and Bradford City. Watford were letting the sun go down on them. They needed a saviour. In 1968, Graham Taylor joined Lincoln City for the princely sum of £4,000 in a lower league footballing career. It was the move that initiated the beginning of a new life. A year after Taylor settled in Lincoln, Reggie Dwight released his first album as Elton John, Empty Sky, to little fanfare. In 1972, Graham Taylor called it a day as a footballer. After going down to a career-ending injury at Northampton, he moved to the post of Lincoln City manager. As the 1971-72 campaign ended, Elton had released Honky Chateau, his 5th album and his first chart topper, where once they had both been as fragile as a candle in the wind. Yeah, you're having that one. Now they were stronger, their paths becoming clearer, written in the stars, you'd probably say. Meanwhile, Taylor's direct attacking brand of football turned the impish ship around, resulting in their promotion to the 3rd tier in 1976 after 14 years of being stuck in the Football League's basement. By that stage, Elton John was afforded the best seat in the house, taking his platform boots and his wacky dyed hair to the boardroom of Vicarage Road. Once vice president for a small fee, by 1976 he was owner and chairman of Watford. In a way, being chairman of Watford meant I could go back to being Reggie again, at least for a little while, is what he said in retrospect. In the March of that year is when the two of them were intertwined for the first time. Lincoln 5, Watford 1. Whilst Watford had long since scraped themselves off a rock bottom, they had just witnessed just how far they had to go just to get out of the 4th division. By the end of the season, Elton had cleared the club's debts and told the rest of the board that he was taking the club to the top flight. Now just for a second, imagine this man telling the monochrome footballing world that in the 1970s. As Graham Taylor roared to the title with 32 wins and 111 goals from 46 games before making themselves known in 9th place in the 3rd division, Watford recovered to consecutive top 8 finishes. The refresh was complete when Mike Keane was sacked. Elton was ambitious enough to think ahead to his first appointment, Bobby Moore, but humble enough to get a second opinion. That second opinion, or just a telephone conversation with a current England manager. Don Revie had 2 words for the Watford owner: Graham Taylor. Now, he was more of a Vera Lynn man, set in his conservative ways of the 1950s. He didn't care for Elton's music, nor did he care for taking a step back into the 4th division. He turned the Watford job down. But after wrangling a sit-down face-to-face, Taylor was presented with a wage of 20 grand should he sign on. Little did Elton know that Taylor was simultaneously being touted by top-flight West Brom. Their offer, less than half. As West Brom told Taylor, he should be giving his right arm to join them at the Hawthorns. On the other shoulder, Elton went one further than he had done with his own board when he said, "I'd like to get into Europe." Taylor already found himself being won over from the wage to the ambition and to the general courtesy not being shown at the other, bigger clubs, and he was officially the manager of Watford FC.
Jenkins, Mays, Jenkins, Mercer. Better passing.
What Graham Taylor found was a proverbial lower league basket case. No wage structure. The only scout was 95 years of age. The training ground was a public playing field shared with local schools, and what little training kit there was, well, it didn't bear thinking about. But on a foundation of double training sessions focusing on dialing up players' fitness and a couple of his former Lincoln players to set the standard, Sam Ellis and Ian Bolton, Watford roared to the title. After thrashing Brentford 3-0 away from home to begin October 77, Watford had clambered to the top of the basement and were still there when they stepped into Christmas 2 months later. It was a matter of time, and a 1-0 triumph at Scunthorpe United on April the 8th with 6 games to spare, which confirmed Watford's championship. Graham Taylor had predicted it would take 5 years to dredge the club up to the 2nd tier. They now had 4 seasons to do so.
Nickel hurt, the play continuing, and here's Bissett. Jocelyn is up, so is Jenkins. And it's turned in by... Here's Downs. Oh, and he's done that, and Bissett put it in. Stirk again. Jocelyn!
And they managed it in one. Entering the May of 1979, Watford had 3 games remaining and a 2-point advantage over Shrewsbury Town, albeit having played 2 games more. 3 games lay ahead that would change everything. The first won at home to Chester, the second at Hillsborough took them to the top of the league ahead of Swansea. Still, fate wasn't entirely in their own hands thanks to a gaggle of clubs with numerous games in hand over them and only 3 teams due to enter the 2nd tier. When the final opponent stood before them 9 days later, the permutations were far clearer. A win would get them over the line. Graham Taylor gave them the day off beforehand, and it worked. Luther Blissett, Ian Bolton from the spot, Ross Jenkins with his 37th for the season, and Roger Jocelyn grabbed the goals in a 4-0 rout. A 5-year job had been completed in 2. Promotion foundations had been laid at Vicarage Road with the signing of Bertie Mee as assistant manager. Backing up the Taylor ideas and the Elton ambition, now experience and know-how was in the building. They also grabbed Eddie Plumley from top-flight Coventry City to be the club's executive manager. He was the man who binned off that dusty little cartoon Hornet and delivered the badge what we know of today as Watford. Added to the continual goals that had become a given under Ross Jenkins, further reinforcements for defence was added via Steve Harrison, saved from the NASL and the Vancouver Whitecaps for 25 grand. Meanwhile, the biggest single splurge in club history came with the acquisition of Steve Sims from Leicester, 175 grand in another move to shore up the backline. At the tail end of the summer of 1978, a forgotten man was reintroduced to Vicarage Road when forward Luther Blissett netted in the League Cup against Newcastle United. Now, this was already an unfashionable club, but now they were spearheaded by a gay man off the field and a black striker on it. In the late 70s, it meant rising above the harsh vitriol from the terraces.
Got it out of harm's way. Here's Downs. Blissett! Oh, yes! Food inside, number 4. Blissett coming in and makes it!
And in the next round of the League Cup, Watford were gifted a trip to the finest terraces in the land, Old Trafford, in the 3rd round. They'd drawn there in their only previous visit, an FA Cup 4th round tie 9 years prior. This time, they went one better, and via Exeter and a Stoke replay, Watford were into their 2nd ever semi-final of a major competition.
That'll drop down for Parr. Did well. Jocelyn. Listen. 1-0. To Forest. And that was what a goal.
Robertson. And Medals, and there was a bad punch, and he just got hold of it. Robertson, yes!
In a season that could clumsily be characterised as Watford's coming out party, it was one that drove home the seriousness of Elton John's role at the club. The fantasy was slowly becoming reality. Out went the platform boots and the gaudiness. Now was a steely determination to complete the story. Watford in the top flight of English football for the first time, and, who knows, maybe even a pit stop at Europe along the way. Crashing out of the League Cup to Colchester didn't particularly matter, but what did matter was their spineless start to the league season. It all culminated in a 2-0 defeat at Stamford Bridge. Afterwards, Taylor launched into a tirade in the local newspaper. He wasn't going to stick around if his players didn't have the guts. Whilst it would be easy to move quickly on and tell the fairy tale story, Watford lost 6 of their next 8 league matches after that. They were officially in the bottom 3, a harsh reminder that this still was a football club who had just 3 years at this level before this campaign. Things would get better, however, and it started with the return of the FA Cup.
Here he is again, and scores!
Now here's Preston. Hit it off the line, hit it in!
In a season where Graham Taylor missed his unlikely confidant Elton John, missing swathes of the campaign due to a world tour, he cozied up to new signings. First, Wilf Rostron came in from Sunderland for £150,000 before the experience of Pat Rice and Jerry Armstrong followed. All in all, over £500,000 had been spent, over half the amount required to reach the top flight, according to Taylor. It was only the eventual winners of the Cup that unseated the Hornets at the quarter-final stage, by which point Watford was still embroiled in a relegation battle with units like Burnley, Charlton and Fulham. An improved April saw them still standing in the second tier, the record books making it look comfier than it actually was, Watford sitting 8 points ahead of relegation in what was the penultimate season of 2 points for a win. That summer Graham Taylor was just minding his own business when he was accosted in a taxi, typically by the driver, telling him of an amateur player who turned out for Sudbury Court. Not willing to miss a potential opportunity but thinking it was probably a dead end as they often were, that was the lead that brought John Barnes to Watford, the fee kitting out Sudbury Court for the upcoming season. It was a season for the Hornets that began in middling fashion like the previous campaign had done. After taking out Millwall of the first round of the League Cup, another early elimination seemed obvious after a 4-goal loss at the Dell. The second leg back at Vicarage Road, however, would turn out to be one of the more miraculous days in club history, not only overturning the lead but netting 7 in the process against the Southampton team who were recent cup winners and on track to be title challengers. And after that they dismantled Brian Clough's Nottingham Forest, reigning European champions we should add, not to mention finalists in the past 3 League Cups, with reserve forward John Ward deployed to mark John Robertson out of the game. Alas, they'd be put out to pasture by Coventry by 5 goals before limping out to Wolves in the FA Cup the following month. Still, a final 5 unbeaten in the league ensured of a top half finish in the second division. It marked another improvement for Watford. The 1981-82 campaign therefore was crucial to which path the club was going to head down.
Here's the involvement in a chance for Watford now. And a beautiful goal. Pressure. Taylor to try again. And a good header from Lumen, and a good shot, and it's Callahan. Oh, it's gone in. What an important kick this is for Bissett. 1-0 for Watford.
Watford had even gone to the lengths of stunning the almighty Manchester United once again in the Cup, but that was about the long and short of the Cup's successes as Leicester dumped them out of the 5th round. In the League Cup, Graham Taylor had eliminated former club Lincoln as well as Queen's Park Rangers after their manager, a certain Terry Venables, labelled them a hit and hope side. Unfortunately, the Hornets, though, were stung in the 5th round again thanks to a Bobby Robson Ipswich Town side. But rightly, that wasn't the story from Watford's 1981-82 season. As they reeled from defeat in the Cup at Filbert, Watford occupied one of the 3 promotion spots alongside Luton Town and Oldham Athletic, with over half the league season gone. This was a club that had long since picked up the momentum of ambition and innovation, with the final piece of the puzzle delivered on a hazy Yuletide morning when Graham Taylor caught Elton John embroiled in a liquid breakfast. Often the audience for a managerial dressing down to one of the players, never the brunt of his fury, the owner's mind was now focused with the manager's ultimatum still ringing in his ear. If you ever turn up looking like this again, that's fucking it as far as I'm concerned. A year on, they were hunting down local rivals Luton and promotion to the big time. It continued as that sordid chapter began at Orient, and this time with a win. They marched to the top of the league briefly in March, and yet in spite of all this transformation from bottom of Football League to the cusp of the top flight, only 13,000 showed their faces for a March win over Bolton. For this, Taylor was beside himself with anger, launching into the fans in a newspaper column. After the backlash he received from that, he held up a banner to the home fans in their next home match which read, "I'm sorry. Turns out it's not the hardest word to say after all. Get in, come on now." In fact, Watford would lose just 2 more games before confirming promotion. At the start of this journey, Taylor said it would take £1 million to get the club up. Only 3/4 of that had been spent. Elton John's first dream had been realised. Now for Europe.
Lane for us, Callaghan floats it in there, Ross Jenkins going all the way.
Now there's a second-hand quote in that book that I referenced at the top of this video. I'll read it to you now. On Watford, one journalist wrote that they were, and I quote, "a pack of mad dogs beating their heads relentlessly against a brick wall, trying desperately to find a crack. And they'd found it. Everton beating on the opening day. Dark horses Southampton hit for 4 at the Dell before Sunderland shipped 8 in September. Whilst Nottingham Forest would have a modicum of revenge in the League Cup, sticking 7 beyond Watford, the Hornets simply buzzed on about their season, winning at both Highbury and White Hart Lane, either side of that. The roll call at the top of English football heading into the year known as 1983 read as follows. Runaway leaders Liverpool, and then a gaggle of clubs including previous European champions Man United, Nottingham Forest and Villa, and Watford were right in that little gaggle.
There, Jackets. Oh, and he might come for business.
Now, I'm not going to put the dampeners on the season, one that'll likely never be repeated from a league standpoint, but it was a campaign with no true title rival to Liverpool. Liverpool, of course, a team who had restarted their journey off the back of a defeat to Watford 13 years prior. Either way, it was also a Liverpool team that flaked out on the final day against Watford, a win which confirmed the Hornets' second place, and with it, Elton John's final objective. They had only gone and qualified for Europe. They hadn't spent a dime in the transfer market to ascend to second, and all of the money spent to go from the 4th to 1st tier had been accrued back in one deal. Luther Blissett, the first Watford player to ever represent England, had just been sold to Milan for £1 million. 7 years ago, they were scrabbling around in the murky basement, 92nd in the league. Now, they were second with dates all over the continent.
Played at Richardson. And he's in an attack. And he scored.
Just when it looked as though Kaiserslautern were going to end the journey at their first available opportunity, the Hornets buzzed back. The 3-0 win in the second leg at Vicarage Road was one that Taylor called the greatest result of his career. Next, they were shipped out to Sofia, holding an unfavourable 1-1 draw and with the away goals advantage firmly in the Bulgarian camp. Then, an even more impressive 3-1 result that took them into the third round, where, unfortunately, the talented Sparta Prague team squeaked by them in Hertfordshire before being a lot more ruthless in their own backyard, inflicting a 7-2 aggregate defeat on Watford. The Hornets have yet to return to Europe.
Into Barnes. Oh, lovely skill. Oh, what a magnificent goal!
Riley's coming towards the near post. Oh, he got a fleck and it's there.
Oh, come on, like that was ever going to be it. Save from picking up their league form, which had ultimately been distracted by the blinding lights of the continent in the first half, Watford recovered from a position in the drop zone in December after 15 games. After 2 wins from their first 15, Taylor's side won 10 of their next 13 on the way to what was another top half finish. But, as you've just seen, the second half of the campaign proved distracting as well. Once local opposition in Luton and Charlton were eliminated from the FA Cup. 1983 finalist Brighton followed, and once Birmingham were vanquished at St Andrews, Wembley seemed closer than ever before. Plymouth Argyle and Villa Park was all that was stood in Graham Taylor's way. George Riley grabbed the only goal of the game. If he didn't do anything else for the club, the new signing had more than paid off his transfer fee, as had fellow new recruit Mo Johnston for his blinding form at the turn of the year and in sinking Luton Town. Both Scots would be lining up in the final, but one man who wouldn't be was Wilf Rostron, who was sent off for a light scuffle in a league game against Luton in late April. In an era where a spotter GBH wouldn't be registered as a second glance, it seemed a little harsh. Nonetheless, waiting for Watford at Wembley was the almighty Everton. Everton, a team who had been champions of England and winners of the FA Cup multiple times over. Everton, a team who came out to Z-Cars at Goodison Park. The mark of what Graham Taylor and Elton John had achieved can be distilled into this one fact. Watford also used to come out to Z-Cars at Vicarage Road. Such was the remoteness of the two sides ever meeting that had remained the case for decades. Now, in the televisual event of the year, they were equals.
Whipping in a good cross. And shot. And a goal. Whipping in quite a good cross there. Oh, Andy Gray. And it's given.
How many Elton John tracks did you count in this video? Let me know in the comments section. And whilst you're counting, have a go on this playlist of football from the 1980s.